friends are always with me. We sing, we dance, we laugh, we are happy every day. Have fun with us, let's say happy, happy.
Okay, hey guys, Rabbit King here. So we are watching The Internet's Darkest Corners by Nick Crowley. I think that's what we're on, right? Yeah, Internet's Darkest Corners by Nick Crowley. So this is a series of 6 episodes by Nick Crowley. In case you're wondering why I'm not doing My Little Worms, well, technically, My Little Worms is still ongoing. I mean, there's already 100-ish episodes. I'm taking a break from that. I said the other 13 days, so y'all can even more of that. But no, I am, not really in the mood to be doing it, so we're going to watch, Nick Crowley's Internet's Darkest Corner series. So we're going to start with, part 1. So let's start with part 1 from 3 years ago. Okay, guys. Okay.
Throughout my time here on YouTube, I've spent countless
Internet's
hours searching for dark, obscure content from all across the web. And out of all my morbid findings, only about 1% of them have actually been turned into videos. This happens for a few reasons, like some of the material being just too disturbing or too graphic to talk about. But mainly, it's because a lot of these topics I found don't really warrant a full video, at least not on my channel. So rather than just holding on to these topics forever, I decided to start a new series here and share with you all the chilling internet content that I've compiled throughout the years and will continue to compile for years to come. So join me in this new venture as we dive into the internet's darkest corners. Before we dive into this, I have to give a huge shout out to our amazing sponsor, Shudder. Shudder is the ultimate streaming service for all fans of horror, which chances are...
In the end, you'll decide the ultimate winner. And
Chapter 1.
some things you just...
Chapter 1, Daredevil. Okay, so this is, like I said, guys, this is Internet's Darkest Corners Part 1. I'm sorry, guys. I'm so sorry, guys. I'm a person who has to do that all the time. I'm sorry. My ADHD medication ain't working at all right now.
It's been over 15 years since the premiere of the now hit show America's Got Talent, a competition program centered around finding the top entertainers in the country. But despite the show's huge popularity, I was surprised that I hadn't heard about its upcoming spin-off, which was set to air fairly soon. The show is called AGT Extreme, which focuses solely on daredevil acts, a premise that has subsequently caused a bit of a stir online, as having a competition focused on extreme stunts means that people will take things further and further to win, which would lead to their performances getting riskier and riskier over time, pushing the envelope and heightening the danger. With this in mind, many critics have called out the show for how dangerous it could become. And as it turns out, even before the first episode has made it to air, these critics may have already been proven right. On the 15th of October 2021, TMZ would first episode has made it to air. These critics may have already been proven right. On the 15th of October 2021, TMZ would publish an article. First episode has made it to air. These critics may have already been proven right. On the 15th of October 2021, TMZ would publish an article outlining an incident that had recently happened on this episode has made it to air. These critics and heightening the danger. With this in mind, many critics have called out the show for how dangerous it could become. And as it turns out, even before the first episode has made it to air, these critics may have already been proven right. On the 15th of October 2021, TMZ...
So, October 15th, 2021. That's what I said, right? I'm sorry, guys. I'm over here trying to...
First episode has made it to air. These critics may have already been proven right. On the 15th of October 2021...
So October 15th, 2021, stuntman almost dies in a horrific accident.
TMZ would publish an article outlining an
They were
incident
4 minutes
that had
into
recently happened
recording.
on the set of the
They're
show. The accident supposedly involved 41-year-old Jonathan Goodwin, a man who had performed on AGT before, where he attempted other life-threatening challenges, all of which had gone off without a hitch. But this time was different. The article wrote, Jonathan Goodwin, a daredevil stuntman on the new America's Got Talent Extreme, suffered brutal injuries after a stunt he attempted went horribly wrong, and it was so bad, people on set thought he was dead. The article would then go on to explain the stunt that Jonathan had attempted to perform, and how exactly it all went wrong. Goodwin was suspended 70 feet in the air in a straitjacket, hanging by his feet from a wire. 2 cars were suspended on either side of him, swinging back and forth. The stunt was for Goodwin to free himself from the restraints, and then fall on an air mattress and avoid getting crushed by the cars as they swung in the air. Then something went horribly wrong, and the cars smashed together, sandwiching Goodwin in between them. The impact caused the cars to explode, erupting in a gigantic fireball. Goodwin fell to the ground and hit his head. The article then mentions that Jonathan's exact conditions weren't known, but that his injuries had been incredibly severe, having to be airlifted to a nearby trauma unit. The scene described sounded absolutely crazy, as the stunt Goodwin had performed sounded unlike anything I've ever seen before. And following the release of this story, curious readers wanted to know more, as they wondered whether the ordeal was filmed, and if that footage would ever get released. But according to the article, this had happened on the day of rehearsal, meaning that there was no live studio audience, and the cameras potentially weren't even rolling. And even if the show had been filming, it seemed highly unlikely that they would ever choose to release this footage. However, as it turns out, during the whole event, another camera had actually been recording on set that day, which just so happened to capture the entire thing. It's unclear who was behind the camera, though many believe that it was likely a staff member who had pulled out their phone to film the act. And somewhat unsurprisingly, just days after the initial report, this very video would emerge, quickly spreading to practically every social media site across the internet. The cars are then seen colliding together with extreme force, as Goodwin is pinned between them. At that exact moment, the pyrotechnics in both vehicles go off, causing a massive explosion. Jonathan would then collapse 40 feet to the ground below, falling headfirst. The video is horrifying, and it's easy to understand why people on set thought Goodwin had perished, as every time I watched the clip, I couldn't imagine how anyone could survive such a devastating incident. But shockingly, Goodwin would actually regain consciousness that very day, and despite suffering serious injuries like 2 broken legs and burns throughout his body, he doesn't appear to be in critical condition anymore, as he's even taken to his Instagram page to let his fans know that he's going to be okay. And though his road to a full recovery is clearly going to be difficult, it's still amazing to see him alive and in such good spirits. Following the news breaking on this story, and the video finding its way around the internet, America's Got Talent has halted production on the show, and it's currently unclear where they will go from here. Though if they do decide to carry on with its production, I personally find it likely that this won't be the last time we see an accident like this. Our next story takes us to an obscure Reddit post made back in September of 2020. The story was told on the Legal Advice subreddit, as the original poster, or OP, was seeking help on a situation transpiring with their neighbor. OP described the situation as follows. I live in a duplex with my husband and my son, who is only a few months old. My father-in-law owns half of the duplex and is renting to us, and the other half is owned by an older woman and her adult daughter. My father-in-law has known the woman for over 15 years and told us before we moved in that the daughter was mentally ill and had strong delusions on occasion that caused trouble with the previous tenants. The last tenants apparently had to get a civil anti-harassment order placed against the daughter, but eventually moved out when the behaviors never stopped. Apparently, the neighbor accused them of kidnapping and abusing their children, as well as abusing their dogs. My husband and I brought our son home a few months ago, and we didn't have any issues with the neighbor until about 2 weeks ago. She has begun banging on and throwing things at the walls when our son cries. She screams at us as well, but I usually can't hear what she's actually saying. I live on Reddit. As the original poster, or OP, sold, 15 years, currently had to story takes us to an obscure Reddit post made back in September of 2020.
September 2020.
Rory was told the situation own illusions on a key moved out. You can't hear what she's actually saying, you know, over the screaming baby. And the 2 dogs going absolutely ballistic because of the banging. It's absolute chaos, and it made my postpartum anxiety so much worse. Every time the baby cries, I experience intense panic, waiting for the screaming and the banging to start. We have called the non-emergency police line twice when I can't handle it anymore and I feel close to a meltdown. And the first time they talked to her and she stopped doing it as often, maybe once every 2 days. Tonight she is back and it is worse than ever. The air quality is so bad right now from the fires that I can't let the dogs out for long to stop them from barking. And the barking makes the baby cry harder, which makes the neighbors scream and pound on the walls harder. The officer I spoke with says that we can try to get a civil anti-harassment order placed, but he knew for a fact that her behaviors never stopped after the last tenants had tried that. And he says his unofficial advice would be to live somewhere else. Is that seriously my only option? We can't afford to move, but I can't keep living like this. The post was met with minimal engagement, as many glossed over the story, not thinking much of it, and those who did respond seemed to have a mixed reaction. Some actually sympathized with their neighbor, as sharing a wall with a screaming baby would obviously not be a fun situation, and especially for someone with a mental illness who seems to react negatively to loud stimuli. While others found the neighbor's response to be fairly worrisome, as it was clear that the behavior had been escalating. But whichever side these commenters took, they all seemed to be in agreement on one thing, that there wasn't much OP could do, other than simply move out. And with that, the post quickly faded into obscurity with no resolution to be found, quickly being lost in the endless content of Reddit. But surprisingly, the story wouldn't end there. In fact, nearly 7 months later, an update would be made, thrusting what was once an unknown story into the limelight. OP's post read, "Update. Neighbor bangs on shared duplex wall when baby cries." My first post never got much attention, but the outcome was pretty wild. In October of 2020, my husband and I were renting a duplex where my father-in-law owned the half we lived in. We brought our son home from the NICU in August, and towards the end of September, the neighbor, 40-year-old female, started to pound on the shared wall if she could hear him cry. The pounding escalated over the next 2 months. The neighbor bought a megaphone to yell through the wall and threatened to rip us apart. She called us child predators, and she'd yell obscenities and threats until 3 or 4 in the morning. The police were called multiple times, but they responded that nothing could be done about it. One officer said, "I'm going to kill you. See, it doesn't mean anything if I don't actually do it." The elderly mother hadn't been seen in several months, but requests for wellness checks were brushed off. The general advice I got was that as renters we couldn't do anything. It was also suggested that this was reasonable behavior, since the baby crying was probably really...
Oh, the fuck it. What the fuck? A fucking course. It's a baby, a fucking course be annoying. But really? You're not gonna do a fucking mental wellness check? Or what the fuck it's called these days? A psychological exam. You're not gonna bother doing that at all? You're not gonna bother with that? Or even better, doing a fitness check on that 40-year-old woman's mother. Like, what the hell?
annoying. Since my first post, we moved in with my grandmother for our safety. The neighbor ended up busting a softball-sized hole through the shared wall to scream at us, and occasionally just stare at us. The smell that came from that hole was indescribably bad. Our security cameras recorded her coming to my son's nursery window at around 2 a.m.
Just staring and holding her... What the fuck? What is the actual fuck? I have no words. I just have no words. I honestly don't have any words. Like, I just don't have any words for that. I just don't even...
Almost daily, just staring and holding her cat. It took until the end of January for police to finally be able to enter her property. The elderly mother had been deceased since at least June, and the daughter had the corpse dressed in her Sunday best, rotting in a dead-bolted bedroom. The news article said that the mother died from natural causes. The daughter was taken to an inpatient psychiatric facility. The update came entirely out of left field, yet this lady's timeline made perfect sense, as the daughter's behavior likely escalated not just because of the new child, but also because of the loss of her mother. And without her mother to care for her and keep her in check, it allowed her actions to go way off the deep end, as by the end, she had clearly become completely delusional. However, this is Reddit, and with Reddit comes a slew of fake stories designed to go viral, which alone caused many to instantly write this whole situation off as a hoax. But digging deeper, this doesn't actually seem to be the case, as some would find news articles outlining a virtually identical situation. As some would find news articles outlining a virtually identical situation. On the evening of January 29th, a welfare check was conducted at the home of 65-year-old Cynthia Newman. The lady had not been seen in months, and it wouldn't take long for police to figure out why. One article wrote, "The body of Cynthia Newman, 65, was found in a reclining chair with a pillow under her head and body. She was covered in blankets in an attempt to cover the body from sight. Newman's body was covered with insects and showed significant signs of decay, including exposed bone and places where skin was starting to peel off. It also appeared that animals living in the house had started to gnaw at the corpse." Also within the home was Cynthia's daughter, 41-year-old Jacqueline Bebout, who had been living with the corpse for over 7 months, never reporting it to authorities as she, quote, "didn't want to be alone." According to the articles written on this, Cynthia had died due to natural causes, though her daughter would still wind up being arrested on charges of failing to report human remains, with her sentence landing her in a mental health facility. But hearing this story side by side with these two threads, well, it all adds up, right down to the month that she claimed it happened, leaving me without a shadow of a doubt that this was in fact real. And as I read OP's post once more, it becomes clear that the strong stench that she was smelling was the smell of a decaying body. And with this context, what started as just an obscure forgotten post on Reddit has now shifted into one of its more twisted threads.
When someone dies, it means they're not alive anymore.
Reddit is home to a lot of disturbing content, and it's here that we find another thread, with this one requiring no context for its darkness to be understood. The post was made to Ask Reddit, where a user asks, "Redditors who know how much time they have left, how does your day look like?" The post proceeded to go viral almost instantly, as hundreds of people flocked to tell their stories, with all of the top results coming from those who actually suffered from some type of terminal illness. One user wrote, "ALS, rapidly progressing. Every day I get worse. Couldn't get my shirt on today. Not really enough strength and energy to eat, though I am being yelled at for losing weight. No pain, for which I am thankful, but unable to do most things we take for granted. I have T-Rex arms now, probably won't be able to walk or stand in the next few weeks. I am working hard to get the prescription for death with dignity. This is not how I want to live. I think I'll be lucky to make it to Christmas, more like early November at this rate. I don't want to live like this anymore." Another says, "My days are a mixed bag. Some days I don't want to get out of bed, and when I do, I can't seem to find the energy to leave the house. I have tumors all over my spine, so when things go really bad for me, my legs will probably be the first to go. This is my time, and it took me a lot of dying before I could take a deep breath and let go of the stress of living. Sometimes the best thing you can do is crack a beer and watch some TV and not feel guilty about it. It's easy to feel like you absolutely need to make each day count, but if I'm happy, I'm happy. The examples go on from there, as so many users have come together to share their experiences, and it's interesting to see how all of their answers differ. With some, they preach positivity, and somehow through it all they have found their inner peace. While others, well, are clearly struggling to come to terms with what will soon happen to them. With most feeling guilty for what they have put their families through, and what their families will soon go through once they're gone. It's all just horribly depressing, and unfortunately, it's far worse than I described. As I've left out one devastating note, with that being that this thread is actually over 5 years old, and those accounts that had shared their stories, both good and bad, have now fallen silent, leaving the accounts responsible for practically all of the top stories in this thread abandoned, with no updates in years. This thread is no longer a group of people sharing what their last days will look like. It's showing what their last days did look like, as it appears that the vast majority of them are no longer with us, succumbing to the fate that they knew was around the corner, leaving this as, in my opinion, one of the most painful threads I've ever scrolled through.
Wait till you see New York from
Chapter
our
4.
point of view.
An impossible
The
situation.
sunset on top of the world.
It's rare to see so many people know how their future is going to turn out and the fate that lies ahead. But most of the time, the future turns out to be far more surprising than you can ever imagine. Which leads us to a website called airliners.net, where 21 years ago, a group of users began a discussion centered around an impossible situation. But for just a brief moment in time, they pondered it, with the subject line reading, "If a 707 hit the World Trade Center." A user named MD90 starts the discussion by saying, "When the two towers that made up the World Trade Center were built, they were designed to withstand the impact of the largest airliner of the day, the Boeing 707 Intercontinental. The Empire State Building survived a B-25 medium bomber, crashing into it on a very foggy day. It was during the weekend when most people weren't there, but still, 14 people died. Anyone want to bet that the World Trade Center could survive a 767 impact?" This post was met with the response, "Let's not try that, okay?" One terror attempt was enough. From there, others chime in, with one adamantly saying, "My bet is no way. Just imagine a fully loaded airliner the size of a 707 slamming into any building. Think about it." And the discussion carried on from there. One person wrote a rather lengthy, well-thought-out response saying, "If a 707 or a 757 slammed into the World Trade Center, it might be much more damaging than the case of the B-25 bomber that crashed into the Empire State Building. It is very doubtful any passengers or crew would have survived such a grim scenario. Also, there are probably more people per floor in the World Trade Center compared to the Empire State Building, so casualties in the building will likely be much higher." Another user responds by saying, "The structure itself would survive, as the buildings are surrounded by other buildings, and thus only a hit could take place high up on the structure, meaning not at or really near ground level. If it could somehow penetrate and hit the base, that would take it out completely, but a hit 500 or 600 feet up most likely wouldn't take out the whole thing." Within this thread was even an employee who had been working at the World Trade Center at the time, who chimed in stating, "Or 600 feet up most likely wouldn't take out the whole thing." Within this thread was even an employee who had been working at the World Trade Center at the time, who chimed in stating, "I am working in downtown New York at the World Trade Center, and when someone is in the observation deck of the World Trade Center, you see planes approaching the LaGuardia Airport, not far away from the building. Sometimes you think that the plane is coming to hit the building, and I always think, what if a pilot crashes a plane on us?" The conversation eventually leads to someone saying, "The scenario is really hellish. I think the flight disaster record, Tenerife, 1977, 582 dead, might get reset by a lot. You would easily have 1,500 or more, since you would have 200 in the plane, at least 500 in the building, and a real shitload on the ground. If the building managed to fall, there might be 5,000 or 6,000 dead. Oh well, that's why they put AC lights on the buildings. This was the final message written in that thread. A thread based around an impossible situation. A situation that could only live in one's imagination. Or at least at the time it was. Not even 1 year following this thread, 2 Boeing 67 planes would crash into the World Trade Center, forever changing the course of the world's history. The same planes that user MD90 had referred to when saying, anyone want to bet that the World Trade Center could survive a 767 impact? And as it turns out, it couldn't.
Damn.
And that's the history of
Chapter
the
5,
camera.
Final Photos.
As part of my channel, I have a tendency to focus in on disturbing videos and channels. But recently, I've fallen down the rabbit hole of another form of media, photographs, and specifically final photographs, the last pictures taken in a person's life. And across the web, there are millions of examples of this, with an endless supply waiting in the future, as at some point, everyone will have their final picture taken, including you and I, whether we know it at the time or not. Many of the examples we can find today are heartbreaking or even inconspicuous, while others, well, are much more disturbing. On April 18th, 2021, a torrential rainstorm began to wreak havoc in Houston, Texas, along with many surrounding areas. The rain fell in excess of 24 inches within just a single day, flooding the streets and many of the waterways nearby, leading to roads being completely covered with feet of rushing water. And unfortunately for 21-year-old Darren Mitchell, he would be caught directly in its crossfire. After attempting to make his way home on Highway 105, the floodwaters quickly overtook the road around him, to the point that it was impossible for the car to move any longer, leaving Darren stranded in his vehicle at the mercy of the raging water that was rising quickly. And given the conditions of that road in particular, well, he knew rescue would likely be a long ways away. Before Darren knew it, the water had made it all the way up to the top of his car as it slowly began trickling in through the crevices. Growing increasingly helpless, Darren decided to call up his family just to tell him that he loved them, while also mentioning that he had managed to make it out of his car and that he believed he was going to be safe. Though sadly, this wasn't actually the case, as just minutes later, he would use his phone to snap this picture. He would then post the shot to Facebook with the caption, "And all I wanted to do was go home." Moments later, worried onlookers would witness Darren's truck begin to roll before flipping over completely and disappearing into the raging water. Darren's body would be recovered days later, leaving him as one of the 5 victims to fall to this deadly flood. Another chilling final photograph comes from an ex-couple who had been partaking on a hiking trip in the Alabama countryside. 18-year-old Jolie Callan and her boyfriend Lauren Bunner had been separated for some time, but the two decided to head out on one last hike as a chance for them to come to terms with the end of their relationship and hopefully start a new and civil friendship. By this time, Jolie had moved on with someone new and was all set to start college, but she wanted to remove any ill feelings with Lauren as she began this new chapter in her life. Together, the pair traveled up the mountains in Chia State Park, where Bunner would chronicle the entire day on his Instagram page. He posted photos of Jolie walking her dog, as well as just taking in the gorgeous scenery around them, with this shot proving to be incredibly stunning, as it shows just how vast the woods were that surrounded them. Bunner would snap this picture before quickly posting it to Instagram as a way to cherish this memory, his last memory with Jolie. Just moments after taking the picture, Bunner would put his phone down and pull out a handgun that he had concealed in his pocket. He would then fire one shot in the back of Jolie's head, before flipping her around and shooting her once more to seal the deal. He then dragged her body to the edge of the cliff that she was seen here looking over, before pushing her off.
Holy shit.
Bunner was arrested that day after turning himself in, as it was clearly an attack done out of jealous rage, as he took exception to the fact that Jolie was moving on with her life, leaving him in the past. And it's likely that in this very moment, Jolie had no idea the fate that she was about to meet, and the plans that Lauren had for her that afternoon. But of all the final photographs that I've found recently, there's one that I find especially chilling, as it just leaves so much to the imagination. On June 6th, 2020, a group of friends had gathered at Frayant County Park to celebrate 46-year-old Biba Henry's birthday. As night started to fall and the party had begun to die down, Biba and her sister, Nicole Smallman, decided to stick around the park and continue the celebration, partying into the early morning hours. The two played music, danced, and waved around fairy lights, enjoying the day as if it was their last. And wanting to document the festivities, the ladies would set up one of their phones and begin photographing themselves. The phone was connected to a clicker that the girls would use to snap over 100 pictures, documenting their night in this dark wooded area. The pictures were a little grainy, and many of which were hard to make out, but it seemed as though the two were having a great time. Or at least they had been, until this final photograph. It is incredibly blurry and difficult to make anything out, but the context behind it is highly disturbing. Just comparing it to the photograph taken right beforehand, it appears as though both subjects had been posing for a photo, before quickly turning to their left at the same time, almost as if something off camera had caught their attention, and even startled them. You can see Nicole Smallman looking to her left, and the body of Biba Henry turning that way as well. But besides that, nothing else can really be made out, which makes it all the more bizarre once it's revealed that this would be their last photograph, as the two would be found hours later, having suffered over 30 stab wounds, with their bodies being hidden under nearby brush.
Holy
The two
shit.
women had been brutally murdered. Following a lengthy investigation, it would eventually be determined that the two had been attacked that morning by 19-year-old Daniel Hassan, and his motive was incredibly bizarre, as he believed that he had made a deal with the devil, who had told him that if he sacrificed 6 people every 6 months, then he would one day win the Powerball jackpot. Daniel truly believed that the only thing standing in the way of him and millions of dollars was the sacrifice of 6 people. And so that's exactly what he tried to do. On the afternoon of Biba Henry's birthday, Daniel had seen their group in the park celebrating, and when the crowd dispersed to just 2 people, he decided it would be the perfect chance to perform his sacrifice. It was this moment, this final photograph, of the two seemingly noticing something on their left, that they would see their killer for the first time, as Daniel had just emerged from the woods, standing just barely out of frame, before he began his attack. In the year and a half since this photo was taken, Daniel has since been convicted of both murders, and is set to serve a minimum of 35 years in prison, though I think it's likely that he will remain behind bars for life. And though the story is quite obviously a tragic one, we can at least find some comfort in the fact that Daniel will no longer be able to carry out the remainder of his sacrifices. The internet never ceases to amaze me with its disturbing content, as every day new twisted stories are being uncovered. So if this is a series you would like to see more of, then please let me know. Is there true...
Well, guys, that's it for that's it for today. If you want me to watch this series more, if y'all want me to watch this series more, if y'all want me to watch this series more, let me know, because I really love this series. This is actually my first time watching this series in particular. I've watched... Oh, which one of his playlists have I watched? I've watched the Darkest Moments of TV History playlist. I'm almost done with that one. YouTube circus videos, I watched that one entirely, and then I don't think I've really watched anything else of this. But anyway, guys, yeah, that's it for today, and so, be geek, be proud, you know, what, be geek, be proud, palm in your face.